I want to share with you some snapshots from my PhD research, which I completed recently. I hope that this will give you some insight into things that I've been working on, which I believe fits very well into some of the themes of this symposium. I will also mention some of the ethical aspects and challenges that I came across throughout my research, which might resonate with some of you maybe, and there might be a few things we can talk about during the discussion. I want to first briefly introduce you to the project I will be presenting and give a little bit of background. My main motivation for designing my PhD project was the so-called refugee crisis, which started in the summer of 2015. I was living in Turkey back then, where I'm from, which is neighboring Syria, so I saw firsthand some of the accommodation problems faced by people who had to leave their country because of the war in Syria. And forced migration in architecture had often been studied in relation to refugee camps as a typology, and primarily in the context of the global south. And after 2015, we see much more work looking into the global north in relation to the emergency accommodation and humanitarianism. And these questions were no longer a distant matter for Europe. There was also a serious demand to address urgent housing problems. And maybe most of you are familiar with this shelter. As an architectural researcher, I was interested in the housing options on offer, especially the structures in refugee camps. Maybe most of you are familiar with this. It was publicized widely, and it received awards, and it was exhibited in museums as well. There were also other structures that were deployed in refugee camps. Many of these were produced by companies that worked on military equipment and nuclear industries. To me, it was really interesting how the matter of temporary housing was approached, especially upon my encounter with the IKEA project, which received massive support by the UNHCR. I was especially concerned by its heavy reliance on industrial design and other industries it was associated with. The next step for me was to do further research on the actual sites. I decided to conduct research in Greece, which was affected significantly by the developments in 2015. But when I started my field work in Athens, I realized that there was much more to the relationship of forced migration with the city than just the camp architectures. I developed interest in exploring more of what was happening within the city, as camps were clearly just one part of the story. But there was much more activity and dynamism within the city outside the refugee camps. Here I had pinned down some of the formal accommodation sites at the time and some of the informal accommodations, housing squats. And the first one actually shows where I stayed for my first two field trips. It was kind of in the middle of this kind of central Athens. At this point, I want to briefly mention how I approached my fieldwork and site visits. I conducted my fieldwork from November 2018 to June 2019. My first visits were mostly an exploration of the city by meeting people and discovering new places. Before my visits, I conducted an extensive digital site research. And by the time I was in Athens, I already had a few contacts who worked with refugees and a list of initiatives and community projects I wanted to visit. The places of my interest were forcibly displaced people where they lived and hung out around the city. When I started my fieldwork in Athens, I participated in various social events and community activities, gained new acquaintances through many conversations I had. I started to realize that there was a wide network that exceeded the local scales to wider city, Greece, some parts of Europe, and several places around the world as well. These were not very obvious connections, and I came to notice those through my further engagements with the site and my conversations with people. I used multi-sided ethnographical methods, including participatory observation, informal conversations, and semi-structured in-depth interviews with refugees and people who work with refugees. By the way, here I use the term refugee as just for practical reasons, and this doesn't really mean refugees as in formal terms. It could be asylum seekers as well. It's forcibly displaced people. It's just for practical purposes that I use the term. Yes, these methods. I tried to keep an open mind about what I might encounter, and I updated my plan as I moved along, as I met new people and learned new things about Athens. Today I will focus particularly on two of my in-depth interviews, which I will present by using pseudonyms. One of my interviewees is Ahmed, who was a resident of Eleonas refugee camp. I met Ahmed at Anka Foundation in Botanikos, Athens, which is also a non-profit organization offering facilities for the participation of refugees, such as language training and other skill-building activities. It is situated in an industrial area and has a large workshop which accommodates practical activities such as woodwork and metalwork. This is a view from Anka building entrance. Ahmed spent his day in this center as a volunteer. He worked at the reception, which was quite busy during the day with people who came to join the activities or register for the classes. Ahmed also used the workshop and participated in the creation of the small garden with plants, as you will see there, and built furniture that are used inside and outside of the building. The wooden furniture you see here, the benches, were made in the workshop of the place. Ahmed was a single young man living with two other single men in a container in Eleonas camp, and they shared this container with another household. For Ahmed, it was important to spend his days at Anka instead of joining the activities at the camp. He admitted of not knowing much about his roommates and neighbors in the camp and his lack of interest in interacting with them. When I asked him what sort of things could be improved at the camp, he told me that its name was camp and that needed to be changed first. As we talked about his days and his relationship with the camp and the city, he explained how he felt trapped in a cycle of dependence due to how this camp system worked. He pointed out the difficulty of finding a secure job, which would allow him to move to a flat, and the threat of losing his place in the camp at the moment he gets a job, even though this doesn't secure him another place. He came to Anka every day to kill time and to interact with Greek people and people of other nationalities. He said that the idea of maybe some dangerous people living in the camps set them apart from the local people. He said that the main problem wasn't about the financial support, but about not being part of the community, having been cast aside. So being bounded by the support system created a form of dependency which was challenging to overcome. The two elements that emerged in our conversation were the lack of interaction with the Greek community and therefore not being able to set free from a bad reputation of camps accommodating some dangerous people, in Ahmed's words, and lack of access to the job market without risking fundamental support. For Ahmed, Anka provided a way to interact with people beyond the camp and creating relationships with people from across the world. He preferred the social activities initiated by Anka instead of those that were organized by the volunteers at the camp. And volunteers that have long worked across Greece and in Athens in particular were well aware of the problems of housing for refugees. And during their personal engagement and endeavors on the ground, they were able to identify certain issues to address, to both provide alternatives, even in a limited scope, and to create models that can inspire new initiatives for housing that do not only consist of provision of shelters, but engage with issues that address other aspects of the lives of refugees that concern the matters of their social and spatial interaction beyond the confined spaces of refuge. One of such initiatives was Muzzy Housing Project. A Muzzy Housing Project was developed to address the housing problem for single young men. Single young men do not fall under the category of vulnerability. Therefore, they are least likely to receive humanitarian support. Similar to Ahmed, these men needed to be integrated into the life in more profound ways, rather than merely sustaining their bare lives. John was a founding member of Muzzy Housing Project, and he worked in other initiatives in Athens before he was involved in this project. And through his involvement with those previous projects, he realized the urgency of the housing problems for single young men, which prompted him to start this housing project. What this project offered for its potential residents can be broken down into two categories. On the one hand, it provided a flat for the potential residents to stay for a year, covered expenses such as rent, food, utilities, Wi-Fi, metro cards and phone cards during this time. On the other hand, it offered support for the residents in finding work, free classes, and helped them establish connections with wider organizations that specialize in different forms of support. This aspect, according to John, targeted independence for the residents of the project. John identified 3 strands through which Muzzy Housing project addresses the issue of independence: having knowledge of local services at all levels, employability, and taking ownership of the flat, which he referred to as communal living skills. Reflecting on these aspects of accommodation, John refers to other projects such as Estia scheme introduced in Greece, which failed to address these matters and instead only focused on providing roof for the residents. Muzzy project recognized a diversity of needs and put special emphasis on connections to the cityscape, both physically and socially. Athens had profound networks across the city and wider Greece. These connections also go beyond the country in the form of transnational connections. Throughout my fieldwork in Athens, I observed that these connections allowed constant exchange of knowledge through digital and physical platforms of interaction, whereby emerging issues are addressed in relation to the lives and problems of refugees in the countries of arrival. So this was a glimpse into architectures of forced migration based on part of my PhD project. Projects such as Anka, which allowed refugees to interact with people and activities beyond the camps, appeared to be providing intermediate spaces where new relationships began to emerge beyond the confines of a refugee camp. My conversations with John, on the other hand, showed me the importance of working on the ground as part of larger networks through which the experiences of refugees are observed and negotiated firsthand, and appropriate steps were taken to address the issues upon production and exchange of knowledge among these emerging communities. While I mainly mention Anka and Muzzy Housing Project, I've been involved closely with the activities of many other initiatives, notably the Victoria Square Project and Communitism, both of which stemmed from quite different grounds and frameworks, but both showed a close interaction of some artistic communities in Athens with the matters of forcibly displaced people faced. Just a few takeaways before I close. To me, it was very important to find ways to use architectural tools to study and document architectures that are deliberately abstracted and erased. I urge for the recognition of these kind of unspectacular structures as valid historical part of the cities. And for this, I use various mapping methods to capture the richness and complexity of the architectures of temporary living by emphasizing their social, material, and temporal dynamics. Beyond more conventional architectural techniques, and documented these fragile sites of experience which exceed beyond white modular containers that are made to be dismantled. Another call on my side would be a call for interdisciplinarity. This was talked extensively in the morning. I try to engage with interdisciplinary work, and I believe architects have a lot to contribute to the world with their skills, but we also have a lot to borrow from other disciplines. I have borrowed extensively from human geography and anthropology while designing my methodology, and this equipped me with a helpful mindset for my fieldwork and interaction with people. Finally, just to say that this research required a continuous evaluation of ethical concerns, revisions of decisions about access to various sites, participation in activities, questions to ask people, etc. And I made special effort not to impose any agenda on people I talked to, and instead let them communicate whatever was important for them. And that's it from me for now, and I'm happy to discuss any part of this further during the discussion. Thank you.